Welcome. Welcome, everyone. Hope everyone's having a nice day. We'll just wait a couple more minutes before we get started for a few more folks to join.
I see someone just tried to get onto the other meeting, as did I, so I don't know if everyone saw your message. I think Gaspar I saw just tried to get on.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, and Sylvie too. Sylvie Fogmartel says she's starting the meeting. I'm gonna go and tell her to come to this one.
Okay, thanks, Kim. Yeah, I think we'll wait for Sylvie. She's a key person today. Okay, we've got Sylvie. Okay, cool. Welcome, everyone. Sorry about the mix up there with the platforms, but happy to have you joining us today on Zoom. I just have a few last people joining, so let's let them in. And in the meantime, I'm going to share my screen. Okay. Great. So welcome everyone to our fourth working group. My computer's just frozen here. Okay, there we go. So our fourth working group today focusing on FMRSP. So we'll be walking through kind of two different stages or two different phases, I should say, of how this will be implemented in Femoral. I am just seeing everyone in very small pictures on the side. So if you have something that you want to contribute or jump in, question, comment, concern, anything, yeah, feel free to just interrupt and jump in and yeah, share what you have to say. This is a session for us to hear all of you, not so much for you to hear all of us. So please feel free to do as much talking as you want. Great. Okay, so for today, the agenda, so we'll be going through a little bit the framing for this working group. It's a little bit different than the other ones, focusing on the learner profile and the faculty profile. So I'll just be getting into a little bit of that quickly. And then we'll jump into what I'm calling phase one. So I think as we've outlined a couple times, hopefully this isn't too repetitive. We are focusing in the first phase of Femoral on replacing what we're calling core one-to-one. So essentially the features that already exist in Femoral, replicating those, enhancing those, whatever that means, before we get into new features or functionalities that are not currently in Femoral. So the phase one is what we have right now. So largely what is under the mandatory components tab under the resident profile. So we'll go through that a little bit and then we'll have lots of time for phase two. So this is the wish list portion of the working group. So whatever, you know, if you dream it, you can do it kind of things that you have for FMRSP. We'll get to that in phase two. And then we'll close off with some exciting news, hopefully, about the renaming contest and our team. Okay. Great. So hopefully this slide also isn't getting a bit too repetitive. So what we're focusing on primarily as we work through Femoral in these working groups is this core one-to-one. So you can see here we've kind of outlined learner, faculty, leave, so the leave of absence and field notes. But do have some additional things that are part of that. So the SUs, the SIPRs, a couple different things under there, and you can see the last one is FMRSP. So I just want to clarify again that what we're referring to as FMRSP is largely in the one-to-one. What comes in the, let me show you, mandatory components page. So as you can see here, it's listed there, and we'll be kind of going through what we need to have captured here, and how we can make this, I think, work a bit better in the shorter term before we get into the longer term wish lists. So with that said, is there any thoughts here on that and what I've said so far? Any questions before we keep going?
If I can just add here, and I think I might have sent it to you by email, but the FMRSP actually starts with the QI project. And there's 2 deadlines that start right off when they're PGY ones. So QI, and because sometimes a QI project can just continue on in an FMRSP. So we just need to make sure that we are including the deadlines, the 2 deadlines of QI as part of the FMRSP deadlines as well. Because essentially it's the same, it will have the same workflow in it.
Okay, and is that captured in the 4 QI mandatory components that are listed here? No.
Well, yes and no. You see QI, you practice audit, all of that, but it would be a bit different. No, we would have to probably lay it out for you. I don't think that a QI is there.
Okay.
I think what's listed here is actually the QI, right? It's all the QI program.
Is
The
it
practice
all the
audit
QI?
is, yeah, QI practice audit is in phase 1, right, Stefan? The first part of their submission. And then the QI final report is their second report that they need to submit for the QI program. Kendra, FMRSP has 4 different reports to do plus a presentation.
Yeah, this here, Kendra, what we had here was just a placeholder for us centrally to indicate if it was done or not. We put in a date there, but we never really captured it here fully. The intent was to capture it here, but it's just so time consuming to keep track of it on a separate spreadsheet for each of the administrators to then go here and re-input it. So this was just a date that we would put to say it's done. So there wasn't any workflow at all that was created in here.
Okay. Great. So I think in that case, I'll move on to the next slide, and hopefully that does touch on the workflow that you just mentioned. So this is what I was sent from our fearless leader, Marissa, on our team for what I think the vision is, or what is included in phase 1 FMRSP work for Femoral. So you see the 4 steps. So the project question and timeline, short report, progress report, and then final report.
Yeah. So we need to add the 2. Yeah, we would just need to add the 2 QI ones that just happened just before this.
Okay. And what would they need to be called?
Stefan, do you have those close by?
Yeah, so actually it's going to be 3 because we added a form now at the start of the year prior to the practice audit. Kendra, if you want, I can send you the 3 names offline after this presentation. So not taking more time.
Okay.
And just to clarify, are we putting both the QI program and FMRSP on under the same umbrella now, Kim? Is that the intent?
Well, the intent is that sometimes it could go into it just because it's going to have the same workflow. So if we're going to create an FMRSP tool, which essentially what it will be is uploading of the documentation that they're going to be sending to us so that we receive it and we assess it. The QI is actually the same thing. It's the first part, because some will go in from a QI project to an FMRSP. So it just makes sense that we include it as part of it. Will still have QI, but then the other one will be FMRSP. But if we're going to design it, we might as well, hit 2 birds with one stone.
So worthy of mentioning, as we talk about the phase 1 aspect of this is mostly just an expansion of that mandatory components screen. So right now, Kendra, if you can pull back 1 slide, Right now, FMRSP is there as just one mandatory component. Effectively, to my understanding, the vision that we're approaching this with is we're going to add support for due dates for mandatory components, as well as make that one FMRSP component be multiple ones as were shown there, and then have some support for file uploads. We're at least in phase one, not going to be working on a full like workflow process for it.
No, but the workflow of someone being able to upload something is exactly what we're needing right now, because right now everything is coming through an email. So when a deadline comes in, we get 70 emails that come in. So the upload would be eliminating the email.
Okay,
And sorry,
so
that's an upload from the residents to Femoral in this case, right?
Yeah, exactly. But right now, this is not happening.
Yeah, right now I don't believe that residents even have access to the mandatory components page.
No. This is an administrative page that we enter to know if they've done it or not. But we've actually been doing it on a Google spreadsheet, and that's how we're communicating it amongst ourselves.
To my understanding, I think where we're approaching right now, just because we're again keeping that core one-to-one, is we first want to just provide this administrative view with a little bit of an augmented functionality with the due dates and things of that sort. I'm not certain that we're looking at expanding this into the resident profile for core one-to-one.
Great, thank you, Natalia. Yeah, I think that's, if I could echo also what she said, I think that's more what we're looking at, but again, we'll have to go through the review committee and everything, as I feel like keep repeating a little too much, but yeah, just to be mindful of that. Okay, any questions on this before we move on? Is there anything here that doesn't seem to fit what needs to happen with this functionality? Or maybe I can just walk through a little bit. So we have the resident themselves. So in this case, John Smith, who has partnered with Jane Doe and Susie Shear. So being able to add, I believe my understanding of this is the admin team member would be able to add or link other team members to John Smith, for example. You'd see the 4 different steps. You'd see the due dates for each of those steps and the date it was uploaded. Again, we'll discuss who is uploading it and then the file itself for each step. Yeah. Some, I think, discussions to come on where those files live. If they live kind of on this page somewhere, I think some of the how is still to be sorted out, but we're just trying to figure out what needs to be captured. And I am going to interpret silence as a thumbs up that we can move on. Okay. Okay, so phase 2. So this is everything further than what we've just shown. So everything that eventually FMRSP could be, or you would like it to be. And so what we have right now in Femoral, I'm sure everyone's aware, is an FMRSP, from my understanding, ideal of what it could look like, but
No,
something that
not this at all. This is not well designed. There was a mistake in how this was designed. So we should not take this as the base of the design.
Okay. Okay, in that case, maybe what we could do in the time so that it's most useful in terms of capturing feedback is, what do you need it to do?
I sent you the workflow, I think, before this meeting.
Yeah, just in terms of helping Natalia and I understand a bit better kind of how, if it's a resident that's uploading this, if it's an admin person that's uploading this information, like just walking us through a little bit more what the vision is behind this. This is, Kim, what you had sent me in each of the steps. So it was divided in step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4. But just in the interest of brevity, this is all the information that needs to be captured at different points in the process. So of course, we need to know their project supervisors. There'll be a filter list that they can access who out of all the supervisors in the system who they're linked with, as well as their partners, it would ask for project question and then project title. So stage 1, stage 2. There would be an upload field in stage 2 and stage 4 where they could attach a document, a progress report in stage 3, and so on through the rest. But yeah, if you could just, as 2 FMRSP newbies here that are working on the femoral side, just explain to us and maybe fill in the gaps a little bit more of what this needs to do.
I just don't, yeah, I mean, I can go through it. It's almost like training someone to do the job, right? So, I mean, it's going to take a while. If that's what you want to do here today, that's fine. I didn't know if you wanted to do that offline or if you were just wanted to get feedback from the people who have been doing it up to date. I'm fine with going through it.
Of just doing it offline, like if this is you'll set us down for a couple of hours, go through the whole thing nitty gritty and just walk us through the entire process, we can definitely schedule that time. If there's, I think we want to capture broad the goals. Basically, what is the goal in moving some FMRSP functionality into Femoral? What are you trying to accomplish? Are you trying to increase the residents' capability of providing this information, or is this predominantly an administrative tool that's going to be used for records?
So it's going to be used for different purposes. The main goal is to decrease an administrative workload that is currently happening, because every time that there's a deadline, the task that the resident has to do, they send their requirements. So if it's the first one that is the project question, well, 70 residents are sending us their form completed. So in my mind, it was more around why can that form not be a fillable form that gets filled in online and submitted. And when you submit it, all the fields of what we ask them to provide us is already in the database. So that, because you may not know this, but as part of the SIPRs, and the SIPRs is a huge project, one of the pieces of the SIPRs is the resident on time for their FMRSP? What is their question timeline? Who is their supervisor? So if those fields are already inputted in the database by the resident having filled on this form, the creation of the SIPR, that piece is already done. Then the supervisor, so the teacher at one point will want some information about the resident. So when they are at one point be able to log in and see the resident profile, they can see that information because the resident has inputted it. So that's why we don't want to just have documents in there. We need to identify what are the pieces that are fields that need to be extracted at some point, that need to be in certain areas on certain reports. And then what are the documents that need to live in there? So each component, sometimes it's just a fillable form. Sometimes it's actually a document, like when it's a short report that a preceptor needs to read. So everyone plays a different part in here. That's why I say it's long. You almost have to go through, okay, the first deadline, question timeline, what happens there? There's a fillable form. Who needs to see this? Okay, Maddie needs to sign off on it. So we need to know who needs to sign off on it so that we put in that ability eventually. And if it's in phase 2, that's fine. But as we're building it, it's probably good to understand what is the workflow of each one of the deadlines that the resident has, because they're not all the same. Sometimes Maddie has a role in here. Sometimes someone higher up has a different role. Sometimes we have someone that has to do an assessment and the resident needs to get their feedback. But right now, all of this is being done through email, where we have an administrator who's the facilitator of all these emails coming in and saying, here you go, Maddie, you do this. And then Maddie sends something back. And then that person then sends that to the resident. So we want to try and eliminate that person there where all of the information is online and everyone can access it for their own need. I don't know if Maddie, you can maybe add to that. Does that make sense to people essentially? For me, it's a huge administrative workload of not having one person have to manage an email, an inbox of things.
I think you captured exactly what we need. So what I see from this page is that we're trying to have the residents upload their reports as well as a means for us to track their current progress. Is that correct? Is that what we'll accomplish in phase one? Because the whole thing of uploading the documents, that's fine. But then I think the reviewing process that will be in phase two, right? So that the document can actually travel between folks and come back as a revised version on Femoral. Is that how we're proceeding with the workflow?
Yeah, good question. I think yeah, if I can say, like, the information that we need from today is essentially to know where, like, we know that there's a field, for example, where we need to ask for upload, but we need to know from everyone here, like, okay, who is uploading, what kind of files might they be uploading, like, does it need to trigger something else? We just need to know, like, in making Femoral, like, of course, we'll know that we need these fields, but we just need to know kind of what's, I think, if I may speak for you, Natalia, I just want to make sure. We need to know what all the fields need to do. And so this is part of the phase two, Maddie, to your question, where it will be the expanded functionality. So things might be a bit more, there will be a workflow, I guess it is to say, different than what there is now.
So I think to answer that, to answer what you're looking for, I think we need to go through each one of the steps, like each one of the deadlines that the resident has, and that we look at what is it that the resident has to submit to us here. And we have to identify either the form or the document for you and to tell you what it needs to do. Like we almost need to have like a whiteboard and write it out. Like there, it's a drawing, it's a little like, it is in the documentation, I think, that I sent, that it actually explains what it needs to do. But sometimes it's easier to explain it like face to face, like other than just reading a piece of paper. So it would be easier if I could show you the first timeline to show you the form that needs to get completed and what are the pieces that we have. And then the second timeline, then what are the things? And then what is the workflow for each one of those? The only thing I don't have that right at the tip of my fingertips right now. If we want to do that, we can pull them out one by one and go through each one of those screens and what they would look like.
Yeah, just to add what Kim said, it's just what you have on the screen right here. It's the question and timeline. So it's not the 4 reports. So all of the information here, and some is missing, but that's the information we collect from the resident. So we would hope that the resident would complete all of these fields online and that we would be able to have access afterwards.
Stefan, you have your hand up. Do you want to jump in?
Yeah, I was just going to piggyback off of what Maddie and Kim and Sylvie were saying, because I was the one for a couple of years that sent all those emails very joyfully. So I think that to simplify, I think what they're trying to say is, and I don't know if Kim and Sylvie, you agree with this, I think the functionality on the resident portal, the admin portal, and the faculty portal needs to be that everybody has access to this ultimately, because, for example, our most complicated submission, which is our second one, our short report, they would submit the document with their short reports. Maddie would need to be able to see that short report. And I don't know if this is the vision, but this is the way that I always saw this to make my life way easier, is then Maddie would have fields where she would enter her comments on Femoral so that it's all settled in the app, and so in Femoral itself. Once she approves this notification then gets sent to a faculty reviewer who reviews that short report so that they can also enter their comments. Once they've entered their comments, everything gets a final approval from somebody, an admin centrally, likely Maddie, and then it's sent off to the resident that you have completed your short report, here are your comments, and then they get whether, you know, it's been approved with comments, whether they need to review it further, and so on. And then that gets checked off that it's been completed. And once that's all checked off, then when a SIPR is pulled, they have a check mark that it's been done. And the SIPR should also, for example, be pulling the title of the project, that it's had REB completed. So there's definitely a web. And yeah, like Kim said, it should be done offline, but I don't know, Kim, if you agree with that, that it should be covering all of those different aspects. I know there's a lot of layers, but that faculty, residents, and admin should be able to see all those things because each kind of has their hand in these reports. I hope that wasn't too much information. I know I speak quickly, I apologize.
That was very good. Thank you, guys, for those. That does clarify some things for us. On just more of an, I suppose, expectation management side of things, like we would most likely be looking at those, that expansion of what is available to be seen into residents and into faculty as a phase 2 thing. Chandra?
Hello. Oh, you're very quick on the draw with that. And I'm in the unit. So I'm just going to speak really quickly and give my own 2 cents. What is in Femoral right now? Like, and I understand phase 1, phase 2, we're just looking to like transfer everything. Phase 1, what is currently in Femoral is not working. And it's not useful. And please don't just create that in the new one. I don't think it would work well. So I understand the goal of phase 1, phase 2. Yeah, but I think
Absolutely.
fixing as we build phase 1, I think that's sort of the goal that everyone's trying to highlight with this FMRSP specifically, I think. So anyway, yeah, that's my 2 cents.
For sure. And to my understanding, like no one actually uses the FMRSP tab on Femoral right now. So we wouldn't be looking at recreating that specifically because nobody's using it anyway. So it doesn't make sense for us to rebuild that one. It's just, if it is not something that is being currently used at all in our current Femoral, we're going to be trying to prioritize what people are currently using in Femoral in this rebuild for phase 1.
So just a question here, Natalia and Kendra. So if we were to look at each one of the steps, right? And we look at the first one is a form to be filled out. If you guys were able to look at this form and say, okay, so yes, this form in phase 1 can be filled in by the resident, right? That someone sees it in the end or just the administrators, that's fine. For us, it's just about if someone can fill it in and submit it, we've just eliminated 70 emails right there. And then what we need to be able to do is then pull out a report from that so that what we are currently having to retranscribe from what we receive in an email, we are retranscribing in an Excel spreadsheet, all of that information that is on that form, which is the supervisor name, the title of the project, the classification, do they need ethics approval, and all that information. So really that is what we are doing. We are constantly taking information in one spot and retranscribing it somewhere else. So I think that I'm wondering if we could look at each one of those steps, and that might be maybe easier. I mean, I'm a visual person, and maybe that's what we're missing right now, because we're just talking about all kinds of elements that we want to see in FMRSP right now, and it sounds as though it's a huge undertaking, but in fact it's really fields that we want someone to be able to log into, complete, and submit. Sometimes there's nothing to fill in, but it's to send us a document that we then have to give to someone else to see. And probably in phase 2, the ability of the preceptor who we're asking to evaluate this project on would be able to log in and would be able to go and assess them because they're in the portal, the documents are in the portal, and that they could be able to assess it in the portal. And maybe it's walking through, again, it's like training someone to be able to do this job is how you understand better the workflow of this project.
Yeah, and that's definitely, I do agree with you on that. Like, we will need to sit down and have that. Like, I want to be able to see what the full process is of what you have to do to go through this. Absolutely.
Okay, sounds good.
Can I ask Chandra, to your question or to your comment earlier about like not replicating what's there now? Like, does sorry, my screen's frozen. Does this like improve what's there now, or when you say like just it's not good at all? Like, does this
Yeah, so
touch on making it better?
those are harsh words, but
No, that's okay. Like,
I think they're valid. And so yeah, so this is the initial idea for how the FMRSP portion could look in the new database. Is that what I'm hearing?
yeah, so replacing like the one line that's here, the FMRSP, with like some expanded, well, broken into steps with, I guess, a due date and upload date, and then being able to attach a file and add teammates.
I mean, it'd be difficult to I mean, it is better than what is there. I don't know that it is. Like, a lot of work needs to be done on it. So I think it's like, what are we building now versus what are we building later? Like, so I don't know that I'm the best one to answer that. It can't be worse, but
And if it doesn't have the functionality of the resident being able to, or learner, the resident being able to update this information themselves, like, is it still useful for this team to have this added to Femoral, or is it just going to be
that's
like it's
essentially
there
what
but
it-
no one uses it?
yeah, that's essentially what's there now if the resident can't get in there.
Yeah,
Okay.
it doesn't, again, you don't, we need to be able to say we no longer need to use the email, right? And that we no longer need to use the spreadsheet. So if we cannot fully replace the current spreadsheet that we have, then we have to continue using the spreadsheet until we're there. So we don't want to be having to update one place, but because this one place doesn't have all the pieces, and again, I can share with you the Google spreadsheet that we use, like the information that we must track to know if a resident's on time. So look at it this way: you're a student, you have an assignment to put in. How does the school know if you've submitted it or not, right? So right now at the University of Ottawa, I think it's done through Brightspace. I'm sure that when we submit an assignment as a student on Brightspace, there's something somewhere that records that. So if the prof of that course has 300 students, I'm sure that there's a really quick way for them to pull out a report and say, oh, Chandra hasn't done it, Stefan hasn't done it, Sylvie hasn't done it. So it's a little bit like that right now. We have a spreadsheet right now. So when people are submitting their tasks, their assignments for the different deadlines, someone administratively is going on this spreadsheet and saying if they've sent it in or not. And sometimes someone will ask for an extension because they need a bit more time. They're on sick leave or something. So we're allowing them. So now we have to go and write that in the spreadsheet, right? That we're allowing them an extension. But if Dr. Seal comes in my office and says, hey, what's going on with Chandra? It doesn't look as though she's on top of things. I would need to be able to go into Femoral and pull up Chandra's name, and I would be able to see, yeah, she didn't even miss her. She missed her first timeline. She's late. It was due on July 1st, and we're now October 1st. So it's a little bit like that like what we're looking for is quick access to information like that. And what we're doing right now is that we're collecting it on a separate spreadsheet. So how do we get rid of the spreadsheet? Like saying, okay, I lost it tomorrow morning, but don't worry, we have all we need here. So we need to have that to be able to say, this is all we need. This here is what I see here in front of me. It looks like it's a report. It's a report with a small amount of information. But each timeline has very specific fields. So maybe the look and feel of that is a tab for each date, like each timeline. Maybe like they all have names, right? The first one is question and timeline. Well, you have question and timeline. So if I click on that, I can go in and I can see everything that was submitted. And then the second one I can see, and maybe it appears in green because it's done. The other one is red until someone submits it. But you can pull out a report for all of the pieces of information that you need, all depending what your role is in the department. That does sound a bit complicated, what I just explained, but all I'm saying is that if we really look at what each deadline requires, it may be easier to understand that it's not that complicated.
Thank you, Kim. That's very informative, and that's definitely going to be very useful. I think it might be a little bit more productive if we do take this conversation offline, and we can do that walkthrough, because I don't. One of the things that I'm hoping that we can strive to stay a little bit away from in these meetings at the very least is trying to figure out exactly how, like, this is, I think, more for us to have a high level understanding of what you guys need and have a broad understanding of like what the goals you're trying to accomplish with that is. So I think if we can move this conversation about like the specifics offline and go from there.
Yeah. Can I ask, I know there was some requirements gathering done in 2019, which I think wasn't fully realized in Femoral. And I think this working group on FMRSP was requested. So I just want to ask, while we're still here, if there's anything that wasn't collected in 2019 or hasn't been the subject of discussion that's been well documented, that's missing or that still needs to be discussed. I'm just wondering if there's any spaces missed.
Yeah, we would have to go through it maybe a little bit more, because how it was being designed was there were some, and maybe Sylvie can chime in here if she remembers, but there were some challenges with how we wanted the workflow to work. And there are things that MedTech were not able to do for us that were just going to complicate. Like, I remember the conversations not always being easy in how we wanted the workflow to be. So I think that this is a good starting point of having some documentation to give you an idea of the workflow, but I think that we should just start building it from scratch.
Yeah, I agree with you, Kim. We had, I think some of the documentation got lost, but we had probably at least 100 hours of discussion on all the different scenarios that could potentially come up, that this system and the workflow and the fields and that type of thing. And we had all that worked out, but the work never went anywhere in terms of actually developing the tools that would deliver that. I think the major thing that changed since we did that work in 2019 and now is the semi-merger of QI and FMRSP, which means that some of the documentation or the workflow that we had designed back then would need to be revised. So some of the documents may need to be revised because of that merger of QI and FMRSP. But other than that, most of the processes that we had identified, the questions, the problems that we foresaw, what do you do when you have two people on a project and they both need to approve, two residents on the project, they both need to agree that this submission of their QT or question and timeline document is the final version. How many times can they go back and forth before it's considered final, and that type of thing? What do you do when, you said you had a list of DFM members that could serve as supervisor? Well, sometimes it's someone external to the university. So how are we going to handle that? So all of that had been worked out. Unfortunately, I think some of it got lost. But I agree with Kim that the best way to even start this process, let's start with the very first form, which is the QT, work that one through the system. And then that will guide us on working the other 3 forms afterwards. So at least let's start with 1 form and work from there.
Okay, great. So I can set that up offline after this. Just to note that we are quite a ways away from phase 2, so I don't think this is anything that needs to be done next week. We are still very early on in phase 1, so just to flag that this can be kind of an ongoing conversation as we move forward on, training us up on FMRSP. Okay, in that case, I guess we'll just jump right to the end and we can send everyone on their way a few minutes early. Okay, so yeah, just to, I guess, share for our team and some pertinent updates that we will have a new developer joining our team in September. I believe September 6th, so the first day of school. They'll be starting. So just so everyone knows, we'll have a new face, coming shortly, who's one of our co-op students. So already going to be on board a little bit before that and transitioning into a full-time role. So we'll look forward to welcoming them in our future working groups. And that we are closing the renaming contest today. So the final submissions will be circulated to the powers that be to decide the final name. But we do have right now, as a spoiler for those who are on the call, MedCore winning by a couple votes. So if you haven't yet voted, today's the day. It will be closing at the end of the day. If you need the link, please just let me know. I'm happy to send it again, but otherwise, it should be in your emails. Okay, any last questions before comments, concerns before we wrap up? Okay, great. Well, thank you everyone for your time and enjoy the rest of your day.
Same to you guys. Thank you so much.
Thank you.